My name is Jason, and I'm a 30-year-old marketing consultant from Seattle. For the past 3 years, I've been dating Lisa, 28. She's the kind of person who lights up a room, always laughing, snapping pictures for Instagram, and planning her next adventure. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect couple. But if I've learned anything recently, it's that appearances can be deceiving. Let me back up. It all started about a month ago when I decided to surprise Lisa with a trip to Miami. Her birthday and our 3-year anniversary were just a week apart, so I wanted to make it extra special. This wasn't just a typical beach vacation. I went all out. I booked us a luxury suite at one of the best resorts, lined up activities like snorkeling and a sunset sail, and even planned a private dinner on the beach. It was going to be unforgettable, for a very specific reason. I was planning to propose. I'd spent nearly a year saving for the perfect ring, a simple classic design that I knew Lisa would love. In my head, I pictured us walking along the shore at sunset, the waves crashing softly in the background as I got down on one knee. It felt like the perfect way to start the next chapter of our lives together. When I first told Lisa about the trip, she was thrilled. She squealed with excitement, hugged me tightly, and immediately started talking about all the Instagram photos she'd take. The sunsets, the food, the outfits, I'll be able to post for weeks, she said, scrolling through her phone to look at swimsuits. I laughed it off at the time, but part of me wished she'd been a little more excited about the trip itself, rather than how it would look online. Still, that was just Lisa, vibrant, social, and always connected. I figured once we got to Miami, we'd be able to relax and enjoy the experience together. But as the trip got closer, something shifted. Lisa's excitement seemed to fade. She started responding to texts more slowly, cancelling plans to spend time with her best friend, Taylor, and brushing off any conversations about the trip. "Yeah, it'll be fun," she'd say vaguely before changing the subject. I chalked it up to work stress. Lisa's a graphic designer, and her projects can get pretty intense. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. 2 weeks before the trip, I noticed her being unusually secretive with her phone. If I walked into the room, she'd quickly flip it over, or shove it into her bag. I joked once. "What? Planning a surprise for me?" She just laughed awkwardly and said, "Something like that." The night before the trip, I texted her to confirm I'd pick her up at 9 a.m. sharp. She replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Not exactly the warm response I was hoping for, but I let it go. I went to bed telling myself I was overthinking, that everything would make sense once we were sipping cocktails by the pool. The next morning, I woke up early, double-checked everything, the tickets, the itinerary, and of course the ring, and sent her a quick text letting her know I'd be there soon. But something felt off. It wasn't just her recent behaviour, it was the nagging voice in the back of my head, telling me I'd missed something important. I brushed it aside and headed to my office to grab my passport, trying to shake the feeling. That's when everything unravelled. By the time I walked into my office and saw the calendar invite I hadn't approved, confirmed by none other than Lisa, the pit in my stomach turned into a full-blown freefall. And when I opened her Instagram later that morning and saw her lounging by the resort pool with Taylor and a group of strangers, I realised the truth. Lisa hadn't just lost her excitement for our trip. She'd hijacked it completely. Little did I know, that moment was just the beginning of a series of betrayals that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about Lisa, and myself. As I stared at Lisa's Instagram stories from the resort, I felt my chest tighten. There she was, grinning with Taylor, clinking glasses by the pool, and enjoying a luxury suite I had booked for us, the same suite where I was supposed to propose. My head spun as I scrolled through the posts. Each image and video felt like a slap in the face. The worst part? She wasn't just with Taylor. There were a couple of guys in the mix too. Guys I didn't know, laughing and lounging in the cabana. At first I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to call her, but I hesitated. Would she even pick up? I stared at my phone, a dozen emotions swirling in my chest. Anger, confusion, humiliation. How could she do this? I had poured months of planning and savings into this trip. It wasn't just about the money or the effort. It was about us, or at least the us I thought existed. I tried to convince myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe I'd misunderstood, or maybe she'd somehow made a mistake. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I dialed her number anyway, ignoring the voice in my head telling me it was pointless. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. I hung up, then called again. On the third try, she finally picked up. "Jason," she said, her tone light, almost casual, like she hadn't just been caught red-handed. What the hell is going on, Lisa? My voice was sharp, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. You're at the resort. Our resort. Without me. Care to explain? She sighed, as if I were the one inconveniencing her. Look, Jason, I needed this trip. Things have been stressful, and you're always so uptight. I didn't think you'd mind. You didn't think I'd mind? I repeated, my voice rising. Lisa, I planned this trip for us. It's our anniversary, your birthday, and I was going to... I stopped myself, my chest tightening at the thought of the ring still hidden in my bag. Jason, calm down, she said, her voice suddenly defensive. You're overreacting. Taylor and I just wanted to have a little fun. You always turn everything into a big deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Fun. You used the trip I planned and paid for to party with your friends, and you didn't even bother to tell me. Her tone turned cold. Maybe it's good you didn't come. Honestly, Jason, you're boring. You just ruined the vibe. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was stunned into silence, the phone trembling in my hand. Wow, I finally said, my voice low and icy. I didn't realize this was how you saw me. Jason, come on, she started, but I cut her off. No, I said firmly. If I'm so boring, then you don't need my plans, my money, or my help. Enjoy the trip, Lisa. You're on your own now. Before she could respond, I hung up, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. Then, determination set in. If she thought she could walk all over me, she was dead wrong. I called the resort immediately. The receptionist, polite and sympathetic, listened as I explained the situation. I cancelled the remaining nights of the stay, every activity I had booked, and even her return flight. I understand, the receptionist said. We'll process the refunds for the unused portions. As I hung up, my anger began to morph into a strange, bitter satisfaction. For once, I was standing up for myself, taking control of the situation. Lisa might have thought she could outplay me, but she was about to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. When the barrage of texts from her started rolling in, angry at first, then desperate, I ignored them all. I needed time to think, to process what this meant for me and for the relationship I thought we had. But one thing was already clear. I was done being taken for granted. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a wake-up call. And I wasn't going to let Lisa or anyone else walk all over me again. The breaking point came 2 days later when Lisa showed up at my apartment unannounced. I had ignored every text, call and email she had sent since I cancelled the trip. Most of her messages were a predictable mix of anger and guilt-tripping. You're so petty, followed by, I made a mistake, can't we talk about this? I'd read enough to know they were empty words, but I wasn't prepared for her to stand on my doorstep, looking frazzled and desperate. Jason, please, she said as I opened the door, her eyes wide and pleading. I'm sorry, okay? Let's talk. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What's there to talk about, Lisa? You lied to me. You stole the trip I planned for us and used it to party with your friends and some random guys. What part of that am I supposed to forgive? She flinched, but didn't back down. It wasn't like that. I needed to clear my head. You've been so intense lately, and I needed space. Space? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You needed space, so you sabotaged my calendar and hijacked my plans? That's not space, Lisa. That's betrayal. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said, her voice breaking. I just wanted some time to think about us. I shook my head, my anger boiling over. Time to think? While lounging at a resort I paid for, with guys I don't even know. You didn't just disrespect me, Lisa. You used me, and the worst part, you don't even seem sorry. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. Jason, it's not just about the trip. I've been feeling like we're not right for each other anymore. I thought maybe this time apart would help me figure things out. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. So, this was never about stress or space. You used me as a backup plan while you figured out if I was worth keeping around. Is that it? Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. Unbelievable, I muttered, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. You strung me along for 3 years, Lisa. I was going to propose to you on that trip. Do you even realize that? Her head snapped up, her expression shifting to shock. Propose? Yes, I said, my voice breaking. But thank God I didn't, because now I see who you really are. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let it soften me. Jason, I didn't know. Save it, I snapped. You've already made your choices, and so have I. I stepped back into my apartment and grabbed a box I had packed earlier, shoving it into her hands. Here's your stuff. Don't contact me again. We're done. Jason, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, my voice steady. You already did enough, Lisa. I deserve better than this. Better than you. I shut the door in her face, my hands trembling as I locked it. For a moment, I stood there, my back against the door, emotions crashing over me like a tidal wave. Anger, heartbreak, and, strangely, relief. This wasn't how I imagined things ending, but maybe it was exactly how it needed to end. Lisa had shown me her true colors, and for the first time in years, I felt free. That night, I booked a solo trip to Miami, not to escape, but to reclaim the life I had put on hold for someone who didn't deserve it. It was time to start fresh, and this time, it would be entirely on my terms. After slamming the door on Lisa, I expected things to quiet down, but of course, that wasn't her style. The text came first, long paragraphs alternating between angry rants and desperate pleas. You're so heartless, was followed by, Jason, please, let's talk. Then came the calls from unknown numbers, the emails, and the social media messages. I blocked her on everything, but she found new ways to get through. It was like she couldn't handle the idea that I wasn't playing along anymore. A week later, the confrontation I'd been bracing for arrived. I came home from work to find Lisa waiting on my doorstep. She looked disheveled, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying, or trying to make it look like she had. Jason, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I sighed, already exhausted from the day. Lisa, I've said everything I needed to. There's nothing left to talk about. Her face hardened, the desperation fading into something colder. You're really just going to throw 3 years away like it meant nothing? I crossed my arms, leaning against the door. 3 years didn't mean nothing to me, Lisa. That's why this hurts so much. But you threw it away the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. She flinched but pressed on. I made a mistake, okay? I panicked. I didn't know if I was ready for something serious. So you lied, manipulated me, and used my money to test your doubts, I said, my voice sharp. That's not a mistake, Lisa. That's a pattern. She opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. I could see the wheels turning, trying to figure out the angle that might work on me. Finally, she said. You're being so dramatic about this. I wasn't the only one in the wrong, you know. You're always so controlling. Everything has to go your way. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Controlling. Lisa, I planned that trip to celebrate us. I was going to propose, but you couldn't even be honest about what you wanted. You didn't respect me enough to give me that. Her eyes widened at the word, propose, but I didn't let her interrupt. This isn't about me being dramatic. It's about me finally realizing I deserve better than this, better than you. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Instead, she looked at me like a stranger, the tears threatening to spill again. You'll regret this, Jason. You'll realize you're walking away from the best thing that ever happened to you. Maybe, I said quietly, but I'll take that chance. I stepped inside and closed the door, locking it behind me. For a long moment, I just stood there, leaning against the door as the silence settled. I felt an ache in my chest, but it wasn't regret. It was grief for the relationship I thought I had, for the person I believed Lisa was. That person didn't exist, and accepting that truth hurt more than I wanted to admit. In the days that followed, I focused on moving forward. I reached out to my closest friends, finally opening up about everything that had happened. Their support was a lifeline, reminding me I wasn't alone. One friend, Ben, convinced me to join him for a weekend hike, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a little lighter. I also booked the solo trip to Miami I'd been thinking about. It wasn't about running away, it was about reclaiming something for myself. I swapped the romantic dinner plans for a casual beachside meal, signed up for a group snorkeling trip, and spent the rest of the time just enjoying the city at my own pace. It wasn't what I'd originally envisioned, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed. Looking back now, I realized that ending things with Lisa wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about learning to value myself. For too long, I'd put her happiness above my own. convinced that if I just tried hard enough, things would work out. But relationships aren't one-sided, and love isn't supposed to feel like a performance. As I sat on the beach during my last night in Miami, watching the sun set over the water, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Lisa was my past, but my future was entirely my own. And for the first time in years, that felt like a gift. The trip to Miami turned out to be more than just a getaway. It was the start of something new. For the first time in years, I was doing something purely for myself. I woke up each morning without the weight of someone else's expectations, free to decide how I wanted to spend my day. Whether it was snorkeling in the crystal-clear waters, savouring fresh seafood at a beachside cafe, or simply sitting on the sand watching the waves, I felt more alive than I had in a long time. As I sat on the beach during my final evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realised just how much I'd lost myself in trying to make someone else happy. For years, I had bent over backward to keep Lisa satisfied, convinced that my love and effort would be enough to build a future together. But that wasn't love. It was compromise at the expense of my own happiness. The lesson was clear. Love shouldn't require you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's life. When I returned home, everything felt different. My apartment, which once felt like a quiet space Lisa occasionally filled, now felt like a sanctuary. I rearranged the furniture, got rid of things that reminded me of her, and filled the space with new pieces that reflected who I was. It was a small but significant step in reclaiming my life. Work became another source of fulfillment. Instead of being distracted by Lisa's antics, I threw myself into my projects. I took on new clients, landed a major deal that boosted my confidence, and even treated myself to a new watch with part of my bonus. Every accomplishment felt like a reminder that I was capable and deserving of success, on my own terms. Lisa, of course, didn't disappear entirely. There were a few more attempts to contact me. Emails filled with apologies, texts from unknown numbers, even a handwritten letter left at my door. Each time, I reminded myself that forgiveness didn't mean inviting her back into my life. Blocking her and letting go of the bitterness became an act of self-respect, not anger. What surprised me the most was the response from her parents. A few weeks after everything had settled, I got a call from Mrs. Thompson. "Jason," she said, her voice warm but tinged with sadness. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what Lisa put you through. You didn't deserve any of it." Her words felt like closure, a quiet acknowledgement that I hadn't been imagining the betrayal or overreacting. Even her dad chimed in when I ran into him at a local cafe, patting me on the shoulder and saying, "You're better off, son." But the most important shift came within myself. I stopped seeing the end of my relationship with Lisa as a failure and started viewing it as a turning point. It wasn't about what I'd lost, but what I'd gained: clarity, freedom, and a stronger sense of self-worth. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I realized that my life didn't need to revolve around someone else's needs to have meaning. 6 months later, I found myself planning another trip, this time with friends. We rented a cabin in the mountains, spent days hiking and laughing around a campfire, and it reminded me how much joy comes from sharing your life with people who truly value you. As I drove home from that trip, a quiet sense of contentment washed over me. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And as I looked ahead to the road stretching out before me, I felt ready for whatever came next. Lisa was a chapter, a messy, complicated chapter, but she wasn't the whole story. The rest was waiting for me to write, and for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Story 2. So, my family is threatening to sue me. Yeah, you read that right. It all started with this stupid Instagram post I made about my sister, trying to expose her fake influencer life. Now, I haven't exactly been the perfect daughter. I mean, I got kicked out when I was 17, and honestly, I was kind of asking for it. Let's rewind a bit. I was 15, hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing all the typical rebellious teenager stuff. Smoking, drinking, even pot. I was basically a walking cliché. My grades tanked, I was constantly sneaking out, and my parents were at their wits' end. Grounding me? Please, that just made it more exciting. My sister, Emily, who was 19 at the time, was the good child in comparison. Sure, she had her moments, but she wasn't getting arrested for vandalizing cop cars like yours truly. Yeah, that happened. One drunken night, a dare gone wrong, and bam, 6 months in juvie. That was a wake-up call, but the damage was done. My parents washed their hands of me. I get it, I messed up big time, but kicking me out right after juvie felt harsh. I ended up crashing with my grandparents, who weren't exactly thrilled to have a delinquent teenager on their hands. It was rough. New school, no friends. My parents wouldn't even talk to me. But I pulled myself together. Finished high school, got into college, worked my ass off, and now, at 25, I'm a graphic designer with a decent job. I tried reaching out to my parents over the years, hoping to mend things, but no luck. Then, out of the blue, my mum messages me on Instagram. Dinner, reconciliation, the whole shebang. I was ecstatic. Dinner started off great. Flowers, chocolates, catching up. I actually got a little choked up talking about how much their message meant to me. Then came dessert, and the whole mood shifted. They started talking about Emily, how she was trying to make it as a luxury lifestyle influencer, but her follower count was stagnant. I could see where this was going. They wanted me, the daughter they kicked out, to bankroll my sister's fake-it-till-you-make-it influencer career. Turns out, their forgiveness came with a hefty price tag. I was livid. I finished dessert, played it cool, and went home. But the second I walked through the door, I drafted this angry post about the whole thing, tagged them both, and made my account public. My phone blew up. Emily was furious, demanding I take it down. I blocked her. The post gained traction, especially among people who knew Emily and weren't exactly her biggest fans. Her follower count plummeted. Now, a week later, they're threatening to sue me for defamation. I'm not sure if they can actually do that, but it's definitely got me worried. I mean, was I wrong to expose them? They were trying to manipulate me, but it was my screw-up that caused this whole rift in the first place. I'm torn. Do I take the post down and let them win? Or do I stand my ground? I don't know what to do. Okay, so I know a lot of you were curious about what exactly I posted that got everyone so riled up. Here's the gist of it. I basically laid out my whole messy history, admitted my mistakes, and then called them out for their manipulative forgiveness scheme. I even threw in a "don't believe the hype" about Emily's influencer lifestyle because, well, she was lying. The comments were mostly supportive, but Emily's friends came out in full force, calling me all sorts of names. Whatever, I wasn't lying. Some people said I couldn't be sued as long as I was telling the truth, but my friends weren't so sure. They said my parents could try to paint me as this bitter, vengeful ex-con out to ruin my sister's life. And honestly, that's what I was worried about. They could easily bring up my juvie record and make me look like the bad guy. Plus, I had no proof of our conversation. It was my word against theirs. In the end, I decided to take the post down. I just couldn't risk a lawsuit. I unblocked everyone, let them know I'd deleted it, and hoped that would be the end of it. Of course, Emily couldn't resist a parting shot. She sent me this long, nasty voice message, basically saying I was just jealous, and that I'd ruined her life. I couldn't help myself. I replied with a little jab about how she couldn't afford to sue me herself. Then I blocked her again. I thought that was it, but a few days later this girl I kind of knew from high school messaged me. She wanted to know why I'd deleted the post. We got to talking, and she told me the real reason Emily's followers had dropped so drastically. Turns out, it wasn't just jealousy, it was resentment. Apparently, Emily had become this insufferable snob after her Instagram started blowing up. She'd ditch her friends, put them down, act like she was some kind of celebrity. See, last year, one of her pictures went viral, and it completely went to her head. She started curating this whole lavish lifestyle aesthetic, borrowing and renting stuff to make it look like she was living the high life. And people bought it. Her follower count skyrocketed, and her ego along with it. So yeah, my post gave everyone the perfect opportunity to knock her down a peg. They weren't jealous. They were just sick of her act. It was kind of satisfying to know I wasn't the only one who saw through her. But even with this new information, I wasn't about to put the post back up. It just wasn't worth the hassle. I know some people might think I'm a coward, but I'm just being practical. I weighed my options, and deleting the post was the safest bet. This whole thing has made me realize something, though. I need to stop expecting anything from my family. They kicked me out, they tried to use me, and they threatened to sue me. Maybe it's time I finally let go of the idea that things will ever be okay between us. I know I said I was done with the drama, but something in me still felt off. Like I needed to set the record straight. Not just for others, but for myself. So, I decided to post again. This time I kept it simple. I shared a screenshot of the text threatening legal action and explained that I'd taken down the original post to avoid a costly lawsuit. I made it clear that I wasn't admitting guilt or backing down. I just wanted people to know the truth, to see that my family was willing to bully me into silence. I didn't expect it to blow up like the first post, but it did. The support was overwhelming. No one mentioned Emily or my parents directly, but the message was clear. Hours passed, and I braced myself for another onslaught of angry messages. But nothing. Silence. I guess they decided to let it go. Maybe they realized they couldn't do anything about this post. It didn't name them, and I had proof of their threats. This whole ordeal has really made me think about my past, about my family. Maybe there's a reason I was such a troubled kid. I mean, I'm not making excuses for my behavior, but my parents weren't exactly the most attentive. It was always about Emily, always comparisons. I acted out, and instead of trying to understand why, they just labeled me a disappointment. They told me they wished I'd never been born. It was a vicious cycle, and I was too young and angry to break free. I didn't mention any of this in my earlier posts because I didn't want to sound like I was playing the victim, but now, putting it all out there, it feels freeing, like a weight has been lifted. I don't think I want my family back in my life. Ever. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I'm tired of their drama, their manipulation, their conditional love. I'm done. I'm going to focus on myself, on my life, on the people who actually care about me. I'm going to keep building my career, keep moving forward, and I'm going to leave the past where it belongs, behind me. This is my story. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's definitely not over, but it's mine. And I'm finally taking control.